people are walking around this planet because I saved their life at 3 a.m. I used to be the king of putting in stents and heart attacks. I loved it. It was great stuff.
When I was about 13 or 14 years old, my dad had a major heart attack. Grandparents that have died of heart disease. So I knew at a young age, actually, that I needed to care about my health.
There's been headlines in all the major news outlets, CNN, MSNBC. New study shows that eggs lower cholesterol. Old data was wrong. So you have to read these studies so carefully. You got to go to the very end of the paper to see that it was funded by the industry. But what they did, so tricky. You got to read the small print. A very sophisticated, very accurate, very cutting edge comment that nobody talked about 5 years ago. I spent 25 years in the cath lab. Best decision you can make in life is adopting without negotiating a
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Nikki Davis, and this is the Plant-Based Support Podcast, where we share evidence-based wisdom, real stories, and support for your journey to better health through plant-based living. Now, I myself worked as an engineer on the Space Shuttle program before changing my own health and career when I moved to a plant-based diet. Now, as a lifestyle medicine physician, I help patients all over the world at lifestyletelemedicine.com. In today's episode, we will be chatting with Dr. Joel Kahn, a plant-based cardiologist who helps his patients through preventive, integrative, and holistic medicine. Now, before we get to that, we always like to start our episodes of the Plant-Based Support Podcast with just a quick learning moment. And since we are talking with a heart doctor today, did you know that a plant-based diet can significantly reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease? Well, one of the most powerful studies, the Adventist Health Study 2, found that vegetarians had a 42% lower risk of heart disease compared to meat eaters. And another major study, the Portfolio Diet Trial, showed that a plant-based eating pattern could lower LDL cholesterol by up to 30%, comparable to starting a statin. Now, these results are clear: more plants, less plaque. Now, our guest today, I want to introduce you to the wonderful Dr. Joel Kahn. How are you today?
I'm excited to be here, and hopefully everybody will chuckle. I also have a treadmill desk. It's not only the famous Dr. Michael Greger, so hopefully nobody will get seasick. I'm walking real slow. But you got to get your 7,000 steps in a day. 7,000 is the new number. But thank you for having me.
I love that. I'm so glad that you're getting your movement while we're doing this, and it looks like you're wearing a vest as well.
Yeah, I've always had a weighted vest for like gym workouts that I use a lot of the time. But a recent study just last week was published that if you're striving to lose weight and maintain the weight loss, and most of us would say, yeah, that's me. If you've lost some weight and you add a weighted vest in, you'll probably maintain your weight loss better, and it's certainly generally pretty harmless. So I've been wearing a weighted vest for about 7 hours a day, but you can't wear a 25-pound one. I mean, it's not reasonable. So I found a brand out of New Jersey. It's about 7, 8 pounds. And when you combine it with walking, you really get a pretty good workout. So I'm always trying, kind of new hacks. I mean, I eat so much asparagus, broccoli, and arugula, I can't go much further there. So I'm trying, other add-ons that take the perfect diet and just add some fun fitness or sleep.
I love that. Well, and I wear a weighted vest as well. And I often am recommending that to my patients with osteopenia or osteoporosis to help with bone density as well.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Good.
Well, for the people who don't know you, Dr. Kahn, I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'll try and keep it short because there's so much we could talk about. But I am beaming to you via southeastern Michigan. Grew up in this area. I grew up in a home where we kept dietary laws called keeping kosher. So a lot of interesting implications from that. I didn't just eat food. I had to think for a minute. Does this have meat and cheese? Does this have pork? Is this bacon? And I just chose not to eat those things. I ate all kinds of other foods, but it made me look at food as something more than just, a grab and go. There was some small spiritual and familial input there. And that led me at 1977, nearly 50 years ago, I entered the University of Michigan. They had a program where you entered undergrad and medical school combined. It's a wonderful program. And the first week in the dorm, I realized this is not my mama's food. This is, number one, most of it wasn't kosher. It was just horrible looking. And they had a great salad bar in a dorm called East Quad, if anybody's from Ann Arbor. And really, I quickly transitioned eating almost exclusively the salad bar at age 17, 18. I had a very cute little girlfriend with me who's been my wife for 44 years. She did exactly the same thing for exactly the same reason. My parents, around the same time, went to the Pritikin Center in Santa Monica, California. It's now in Miami. And my mother started making lentil loaf at home when I went back on a weekend instead of meatloaf. So all of a sudden, it was like fiber everywhere, fiber, like Toy Story. And then, I read John Robbins' book, and I've heard of Dean Ornish. Those all took a few years, but I stopped eating animal foods in the 70s, and grateful for it. I mean, 100% stopped eating animal foods in the 70s. And so, it was that, kind of family background. My parents made a food change. I was in the medical world early in life. I found Dean Ornish early in life, and then I found Pritikin, then I found Esselstyn, then I found Furman. Everything took a little while, but I agree with you. I mean, you can literally prevent and reverse heart disease with a plant-based diet. You still have to do some testing. But the other key is you got to do it early if you really want to prevent heart disease. Most of us in our 40s, 50s have silent heart disease, and we're more working on halting and reversing. We're not really preventing it. It's there. We can talk about how do you know that, because I'm a really hardcore plant-based eaters should have some cardiac testing. There's too much genetic input and other factors. So I don't think anybody gets a pass. If you're alive, you need a heart test or two, but we can talk about that. Yeah, I practice like you, lifestyle cardiology. I stopped doing the cath lab. I used to be the king of putting in stents and heart attacks. I loved it. It was great stuff. People are walking around this planet because I saved their life at 3 a.m. But I try and, be way upstream, make sure you never get in the cath lab, getting a stent or a bypass. And, we got to start earlier in life.
Absolutely. Well, and that, I have a significant family history as well. When I was about 13 or 14 years old, my dad had a major heart attack when I was at home alone with him. Thankfully, he barely survived.
Oh.
But that, and of course, grandparents that have died of heart disease. So I knew at a young age, actually, that I needed to care about my health. And I started removing started removing animal products from my diet as a teenager because I felt like that would be healthier. I just, visually looking at a greasy hamburger, I said, that just can't be good for me. It just didn't make sense to me logically that would be a health food, as opposed to looking at carrots and broccoli, like that seemed like that's health food, right? So
I agree.
So tell us a little bit then about kind of some of these cardiac tests and markers that you recommend that people get.
Well, number one, I just make sure everybody hears. They're going to hear it from you, and they're going to hear it from Paul Chatlin. They're going to hear it from anybody else at Plant-Based Support. That the best decision you can make in life is adopting without negotiating a whole food, plant-based, home cooked, close to nature, brightly colored, diverse, plant-based diet. And I don't need to say plant-based because I eat only plants, 100% plants, nothing but plants, some raw, some cooked, mostly at home. I've navigated restaurants for nearly 50 years, and you can survive. It's a little harder if you're following a strict SOS-free diet, but you can navigate it. So everybody, don't even question it. I'm kind of a geek about medical literature, and there just aren't favorable ketogenic diet, paleo diet, carnivore diet studies. There's every week so many favorable plant-based diet studies. Nutritional research is very difficult to do. I just want to give you one example, and then I'll talk about cardiac tests. I'm not sure exactly when this interview will be released, but in the past 10 days, there's been headlines in all the major news outlets, CNN, MSNBC, whatever you want, that new study shows that eggs lower cholesterol. Old data was wrong. Oh, that's interesting. All my patients are asking me, eggs lower cholesterol? You told me, that they're pretty rich in cholesterol and some saturated fat, and I should avoid them. which I do tell patients you should avoid them for a lot of reasons. So it turns out I read the study in detail, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. You read the study, you quickly go to the conclusions. Now, you got to go to the very end of the paper to see that it was funded by the egg industry. It's from Australia, but that doesn't mean it's absolutely garbage, but it makes it questionable. But what they did, it's so tricky. You got to read the small print. They had a control group. The control group had a pretty high saturated fat diet, and it was also pretty high in cholesterol. And then they had an intervention group where they took the saturated fat foods out. They added in tofu and lentils, and they added 2 eggs a day, and the cholesterol fell. Well, they took the saturated fat foods out, like the fatty meats, the cheese. They put in 2 foods that are known to lower cholesterol, like the portfolio diet, tofu and lentils, and they added in 2 little measly eggs a day. Of course, the cholesterol fell because they made a dramatic improvement in their diet, and the eggs weren't the improvement. The improvement was substituting saturated fat. Of course, they didn't study, forget the eggs, let's just take away people's saturated fat, meat, and cheese and put in tofu and lentils. Their cholesterol would have fallen dramatically. So you have to read these studies so carefully. And it was just scam science, but it still will be read by people that like eggs, and they'll say, good, I'll eat 4 eggs a day instead of 2 and get my cholesterol even lower while they're eating it with their pork sausage. It's not going to work out well for them. So cardiac testing, I really do strongly believe. Of course, some of the audience knows I was there from the first days of founding PB support with Paul Chatlin in Detroit in early 2014. Paul's a great example. Nobody adopted a salt, oil, sugar-free plant whole food diet more quickly and loyally than Paul Chatlin. But he found out through some blood work I ultimately did on him that he inherited a genetic predisposition to having atherosclerosis that does not respond to diet. That's a blood test called Lipoprotein a. I'm not trying to sell books, but I wrote a book on the topic so everybody sees the word. Everybody should have that blood test because you might think you are eating incredibly healthy. And I also know other members of plant-based support that have been so loyal to the whole food plant-based diet, and they've had significant heart disease and stents and even heart attacks. And they all have inherited, since this does impact about 20% of people. So if we have thousands of members in plant-based support, we've got probably 1,000 or more members that inherited that. And very few primary docs and even cardiologists draw a $25 blood test. I'm sure you do, and I've done it for about 15 years. And I'm flooded with patients that have silent heart disease. So that gets to the next question. Other than just the basic lab tests, if you're a vegan, get a vitamin D level, you might be low. This isn't a secret. Get a B12 level, you might be low. It's not a secret. I like to draw an omega-3 blood level. It's available through Quest and LabCorp, the Omega Check, the Omega Index. A lot of my patients are extremely low in omega-3, including the meat eaters, the turkey eaters, the hunters, the venison eaters. A few of them are eating, so much salmon that they're okay, or they're taking fish oil or algae oil. But get an omega-3 blood level. Get an inflammation blood test, high sensitivity C-reactive protein. We call it HSCRP. You want to have a healthy brain and a low cancer risk and a low diabetes risk and a low heart disease risk. You should have a low CRP level, but you might have a dental issue, you might have a skin issue, you might have a gut issue, might have a food allergy. So, might have mold, Lyme, all the things that are out there. So you really want to know if you're inflamed or not. You might feel it, but you want to see the blood work. Those are the biggest ones. I like a homocysteine level. That's a hard word, homocysteine. It's so easy to correct it with certain B vitamins. And then finally, I don't care. I've been practicing cardiology over 35 years. I've seen so many people playing pickleball that have advanced heart disease and they don't have a clue. They feel great. I have no symptoms, doc. I just played 2 hours. So I get everybody to do a heart calcium CT scan. This is a test that was developed in 1990. My God, by now, everybody on the planet should know about it. Their doctor should have told them about it. They should have had one. but it's probably about 2% of people have had this test. You lie in a stretcher at a hospital, you go on a CT scan. It's a round, non-claustrophobic CT scanner. For maybe 3 seconds, you hold your breath. No needle, no injection, no iodine, no allergy, no nothing. And you leave. You don't even have to take your shirt off. You might pay $100 for it. It isn't always covered by insurance. In fact, it usually isn't. But for $100, it's the best heart test value on the planet. And you want to be a zero. You want to have a calcium score of 0, which means within the limits of the test, you have no detectable heart artery disease. And with 10,000 research studies, your chance of a heart attack in the next 10 years is so low. I don't put people on medication if they're a 0. We may have to tweak a few things, but I've just lowered their risk so dramatically low, proven, that they'll come back in 5 to 7 years and we'll repeat it all. However, so many people, my skinny little yoga women in my practice that are fit as a fiddle and swimming and running, they're full of silent atherosclerosis. And very often we find a family genetic input that's, if they're abnormal, I'm going to do crazy number of labs. Sometimes their diet's off, of course. Sometimes they've got bad gums and teeth and other issues, but you got to check your heart. I don't care if you're vegan. I do it on myself, and I'm getting close to 50 years, clean diet and fitness and sleep. And I'm still a 0. I'm proud to say that. It's good for marketing. But I think that's partly because I started this journey at age 18, and starting at age 50, 55 is worth it. 60, 65 is worth it. But the earlier, the better. So get your kids on a whole food, plant-based diet. And it's unfortunately, I don't know if we're winning the war out there with the young people, but well, we got to keep trying.
Well, thank you. The lipoprotein a, that is one that I commonly will check in people. I'm curious, and thankfully I checked in myself and mine's low. I was worried about that because of my own family history. But with the lipoprotein a, you mentioned that it's really not something that can be improved using lifestyle changes. Have you ever seen anything help improve it?
Well, you're catching me in my home study, and I got all kinds of show and tell. It turns out niacin, vitamin B3, this is not a company I own, it's just a company. Vitamin B3 has been known for 70 years to lower cholesterol rather dramatically, and backed by studies in the 1970s and 1980s, it lowers cholesterol and heart attacks and strokes. Wonderful study called the Coronary Drug Project that actually showed people on niacin live longer than people not on niacin. But about 20 years ago, it was shown that the same niacin, vitamin B3, lowers lipoprotein A. And sometimes, even though the textbooks won't say this, 50, 60, 70%. So if you're in my office and I do your blood work and your lipoprotein A comes back high, and particularly if you do that heart CT scan and I find some silent plaque, I'll probably talk to you about the whole gamut of diet, exercise, and lifestyle. We'll talk about statins or not, but I'm probably going to try you for 2 months on niacin. And you might be one of those dramatic responders. I just don't know how to predict it, where your numbers really, really drop. And I'll keep you on it and watch you carefully. In the general cardiology world, of course, they never talk about nutrition and lifestyle usually, and they certainly have stopped using niacin because of the popularity of statins and other drugs, but it still works pretty amazing.
And are there any side effects people should be concerned with taking niacin?
There's a very cool hot flush. I like it. Other people hate it. This particular version, the reason I take it myself and I use it, it's called extended release niacin. Very little flushing. I take with a meal and very well tolerated. And then like any potent vitamin or prescription drug, you got to do blood work. I always will check liver enzymes and blood sugar, but it's well known. It's the flush, kind of a menopausal kind of feeling. Now, I was just going to say, the pharmaceutical industry, maybe a decade ago, woke up to the fact if there's 2 billion people in the world that inherited lipoprotein A, maybe we have a market to sell to, because things like Lipitor and Crestor absolutely don't work for lipoprotein A. They don't lower it, they often cause it to go up. So there are 3 drugs in studies right now that one was expected to be announced and maybe released in 2025, but it's been delayed. And the other 2 are a couple of years further down the road. So by 2030, I think we'll have some very potent, tools for lipoprotein A people. We have potent tools for cholesterol people and blood pressure people and blood sugar people, but we don't have good, potent, lipoprotein A tools right now, other than the one I showed you.
Right. So with the markers and the testing that you've mentioned for heart disease, one of the other ones that I will often check is the apolipoprotein B. Is that something that you ever check with your kind of basic set of markers that you look at?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story, but I'm going to lean over for 1 second. My noisy little beast decided to join me, and since we're animal lovers and plant lovers,
Yes. Hi,
I'll
sweetheart.
for a while. She's a sweet little, unless she sees a bunny. She gets violent if she sees a bunny. So I gave a lecture 30 years ago in a local Detroit restaurant for a drug company. I did that at the time, paid, called me a pharmaceutical shill, a cholesterol drug. And a world famous cholesterol expert came. And the deal was he spoke for 30 minutes, I spoke for 30 minutes, everybody ate their dinner. And he was such a big draw that like 300 people showed up, which was unusual, but back then you could do those things. He started talking first, and 3 hours later he stopped, and there was like 3 people left in the room. So I gave a 20-second summary, and that was my presentation. But his message, I remember, other than the comical, ridiculous nature of his presentation being so long, was he kept saying over and over, it's an ApoB world, boys and girls. It's an ApoB world. And anybody that follows advanced lipids by now would know who I'm talking about, because it's this famous statement. So I've been drawing ApoB blood tests, apolipoprotein B, very different than lipoprotein A. It's just another cholesterol test. I find it very useful. I like to follow it. And if you have serious heart disease, we're trying to drop your ApoB level very low. Nowadays, the lower the better is the mantra of cholesterol management. If you have disease, I wouldn't touch a prescription drug if you have that CT scan. And that's what I use it for. I use it if you're a 0, I take people off prescription drugs and put them on lifestyle alone. So, that's the other reason. If anybody's worried, the radiation dose of this heart CT scan I'm talking about, because that comes up, is equivalent to a woman getting a mammogram. It's considered very low. I just emailed a patient an hour ago. Do that again in 8 years. It's very low. It's very infrequent. The goal, the game I play is stay a 0, stay a 0, stay a 0. So far I've been able to do that for the 25 years I've been checking my calcium score, and I don't do it very often.
Okay. So a question about that
Lucy
then.
wants
A lot of
everybody.
people, hello. So the coronary artery calcium score,
She's a good girl.
CAC score,
Rescue dog. In
CT.
case anybody's worried, rescue dog.
Oh, yeah. But the CAC score, it's showing us old calcified, hardened plaque in the heart arteries.
Right.
So sometimes I'll get questions from people because, I think in general in the plant-based world, we talk a lot about, well, the hardened plaque is old plaque. It shows that, yes, in your past life, up until now, you have been depositing plaque into your arteries, but it doesn't show the soft plaque, which is what typically ruptures when you have a heart attack. So tell us a little bit about that and how, do we check, is there a way to check soft plaque? Are there any good tests for that? Or is that something you would ever recommend? And if somebody really truly makes a significant lifestyle change, would it be something where they could potentially recheck a CAC score in say 5 or 10 years? And if it's unchanged, then maybe that's enough to say what they're doing is working.
Right. So you're raising a very sophisticated, very accurate, very cutting edge comment that nobody talked about 5 years ago. I spent 25 years in the cath lab. We never once said the words, hard plaque, soft plaque. We couldn't tell. You just got a blockage and we could put in a stent, and we were heroes. And then we went out and drank coffee in plastic cups and we're killing ourselves. Now we know not to do that either. But 15 years ago, a more advanced CT scan of the heart was introduced called a coronary CT angiogram. You have to inject iodine dye. You have to be in that tube just a little longer, and it's a little more radiation. And it was a good test. In fact, the hospital that I did most of my work at was a world pioneer. You're in the emergency room, you're having chest pain. We'd go right to the CT scan. If you got clean arteries and good lungs, you'd be out of there in an hour. Quicker, easier, save money. And if you had blockage, we know it right away. And things like that were useful, but it was all read by the eyeball. And there's error in there, the subjective reading. So about 5 years ago, a company that I don't own called Clearly developed an AI software that took those pictures with iodine injection. Iodine is a mineral, it's not radioactive, also makes you feel hot. And they developed a way to read these tests so accurately. So that's called a Clearly Health coronary CT angiogram. And they're completely space age transformation of our ability to be accurate and read these things accurate. So I adopted it quickly. When I see something that's breakthrough, I can recognize pretty quick. And I've ordered close to 1,000 of these Clearly CT angiograms. Why doesn't everybody get one? One, it's more radiation. Two, you have to not be allergic to iodine. I actually had a patient today with a life-threatening iodine allergy. I can't order it on him. I want to and all. And three, it's about a $1,700 test, and you pay for it most of the time. If you're in an emergency room, a different situation. The information I get, how much soft plaque, how much hard plaque, exactly how much narrowing, and then we can track the plaque. Every 3 years, do the test. It's incredible. There are a lot of people. I haven't encountered anybody yet that has a calcium score of 0 with a ton of soft plaque. There are some of them. But if your calcium score is 20, 30, 40, you got the disease. That's a lot lower than somebody with a calcium score of 800, 900, 1,000. But I've had people with low calcium scores. They're never normal, but they're low and just unbelievable. Usually they're metabolically, they're pre-diabetic, their triglycerides are in poor shape, their waistline's up, their homocysteine levels up. They're just not healthy people. They have gout and other conditions. And, the testing really helps convince them of lifestyle change. That's a good thing. It convinces them a need to be adherent to lifestyle supplements, whatever we're doing, prescription drugs. And so we will, use these advanced CTs. Unfortunately, ultrasound and MRI do not cut the mustard. You can't see the arteries. You can see other parts of the heart, but not the arteries.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering that, because I do get that question a lot with some of my patients as well. So, Dr. Kahn, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I could just talk to you for hours. I could talk to you for 3 hours, just like that talk that you had to listen to. So again, thank you so much. And for those who are listening, we would love for you to join our growing community at plantbasedsupport.org. We have in-person and virtual events. And if you love our show, help us grow at plantbasedsupport.org. Every donation helps us support more people like you on their journey to health. And in addition to our website, you can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn. Please subscribe, like, comment. Now, Dr. Kahn, do you yourself have a website or social media handle that you'd like to share with our listeners so they can learn more about you?
Yeah. I have been in the website social media business for a long time. www.drjoelkahn.com, DRJOELKAHN. There's how you spell it, DRJOELKAHN.com. It'll take you to my weekly podcast, a plant-based podcast, not many of those, called Heart Doc VIP. The V's for vegan, the I's for integrative, and the P's for preventive. And lots of articles, and I see many patients all over the United States every week. And I'm mainly active, particularly on Instagram, DRJKAHN, many times a day, sometimes funny stuff, mostly medical stuff. This morning I talked about the egg study, the famous biased egg study. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thanks again to Dr. Joel Kahn, who joined us today. Until next time, I'm Dr. Nikki Davis with the Plant-Based Support Podcast.
That's it for today's episode of the Plant-Based Support Podcast. We're here to remind you that change doesn't happen overnight, but every step, every choice, and every meal brings you closer to the health and life you deserve. At Plant-Based Support, we believe no one should walk this journey alone. Knowledge matters, but so does encouragement, accountability, and community. If today's conversation inspired you, Share it with someone who needs a little hope. Together, we can create a ripple of change that touches families, communities, and future generations. Want more resources or to connect with our team? Visit www.plantbasedsupport.org for articles, guides, and community support. Or reach out anytime at connect@plantbasedsupport.org. And if you're enjoying the podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more people discover this message of possibility and healing. Thank you for listening, for learning, and for choosing progress over perfection. This is Plant-Based Support, where plants heal, hope grows, and community carries us forward. Until next time, keep moving toward health, and remember, you're not in this alone.